Hello and welcome to Dabbling in Journals. And today we're looking at my Commonplace book. And there's 3 questions I'm going to think about. 1, what is a commonplace book? 2, why would we want to use a commonplace book? And 3, how should we use a commonplace book? Or maybe I should say, how could we use? Because I don't think there's any rules. Right, so let's get started. This is my little commonplace book. And the first thing that I do when I'm trying to ask a question such as, what is a commonplace book? Is I'll look in the dictionary. And according to the dictionary, a commonplace book is a book in which notable extracts from other works are copied for personal use. And the reason that I did that and the reason that I was interested in the question is because when I've shared this book previously on my channel, I had a comment from somebody saying, that's not a commonplace book, that's a scrapbook. And when I show you, you'll see why they said that, but I still will argue that this is my commonplace book. And let's see if you agree with me by the end. Now, I also looked at Google's new artificial intelligence information that you just get whether you want it or not when you ask a question. And that said, a commonplace book is a personal collection of information people use to organise their ideas and knowledge. It's a way to gather and store information from a variety of sources such as books, conversations, or the internet. Here I'm on my index of my commonplace book. So I do keep an index and I've numbered my pages. And in case you're interested, this is a Midori MD notebook in the A6 size. When I've used commonplace books for work, I've used a bigger size, but this is for a hobby. So I'm using a smaller one because it's cute and I wanted to. I hadn't got a reason. Okay, so as I just flip through some of my pages, that one's blank. It's getting lost into my plant. That one's blank because I don't know how long my index is going to become. And so I just left those pages blank. Okay, so what I wanted to do was mention the fact that commonplace books can be used for a variety of different purposes and they can be presented in a numerous ways depending on what you want to do. And I can see why somebody thought this was a scrapbook because I scrapbook in it, right? So I love doing little bits of paper crafting, as you know, if you watch my channel. And if you're new here, I just really love doing little bits of paper crafting. And so I do decorate my pages. And as I've already said, this commonplace book is me collecting information just for the fun of it, just because I'm interested, just because I want to. Having said that, I think it's starting to evolve. And as you can see, I started it in 2021. And it's, you know, just collections of things that I found interesting and wanted to share on my channel in case anybody else finds them interesting. But it is starting to evolve, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But first of all, let's look at some famous examples. So much more famous than mine, given that I'm not famous at all. And so a really obvious one to pick is this one. And this is an excerpt from Leonardo da Vinci's Commonplace book. And he used his book to make notes on art, on scientific observations, on mathematical studies. He did inventions and made personal observations. So he used it in a really wide variety of ways just to follow up on his interests and keep all his ideas and information collated in one place. Now, the next picture that I'm going to show you is an excerpt from John Locke. He's a philosopher and he's one that I admire, and he wrote some books on how to keep a commonplace book because he kept commonplace books. And this excerpt is showing you his index. And as you can see, he's trying to explain how to use an effective index in a commonplace book by using page numbers and I don't know how to say that word, alphabeticizing, is that a word? Did I just make it up? But putting his index in a alphabetical order. And when you look at mine, if we go back to mine, my index is in no order whatsoever. I do have page numbers. The book doesn't come with page numbers, but I've just written them into the corners of the pages. but I have put what each sort of topic. So I've collected little extracts, quotations, whatever you want to call them. I've collected them in sort of topics, and I've put the topics down in my index and the page numbers that I covered them, which is perfectly adequate for me. Now, if this was a much more complex commonplace book that I was using for a really specific purpose, then I might want to have my index alphabetical, because it makes it much quicker and easier to find what you want to look back on. And indeed, I could, when I finish my book, if I wanted to, I could create an alphabetical index and just tip it in the front, stick it in the front or the back, wherever. So that's John Locke looking at using an index. Can't remember where I was now. It doesn't really matter. I'll just carry on flipping through. Okay, and the next little excerpt I wanted to give you, just to show that it isn't just philosophers and great thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci that keep commonplace books. Actually, that's not very fair. I have no idea whether or not this next person is a great thinker, because I've never heard of him. But his name is the Earl of Roden. And this excerpt that I'm showing you now comes from his commonplace book, where he collected poems and recipes. And this is an example of a recipe. So if that's your interest, that's what you can put in your commonplace book. And then I just wanted to finish off with one last excerpt to show you. And this next one is from Virginia Woolf, who was a writer. And in her commonplace book, I should imagine that she would also collate quotations like I have done, but without the decorations, probably. Although some people do illustrate their commonplace book. Some people illustrate them themselves. I'm just using papercraft, but you could illustrate it yourself, or you could have no illustrations, just have your quotations, your writing, your ideas. And Virginia Woolf here, as I said, she would probably collect quotations, books to read lists, I should think. And here we've got an example of her pasting in the work of another writer and writing notes on it. So she's annotated it, writing notes, explored her ideas. And the last one that I'm going to mention is my own. So when I was writing my PhD, for example, I kept a commonplace book to help me with that process. And so everything that I put into that commonplace book was related, or I thought it might be related, to the ideas I was researching. So I would put quotations in my commonplace book, as I am here, but without the decoration. And I would put quotations, obviously from articles and books. I would put in interesting ideas that I might have picked up from a lecture. I might pick up interesting ideas from discussions with other philosophers. I might put my own ideas. And what was also really important, because you should never pass somebody else's ideas off as your own when you're writing something that's going to be published, or perhaps ever, I don't know. That's an ethical question that I'm not going to go into right now. But I would write down where the ideas came from, whether they came from a discussion and with whom, a lecture, whose lecture it was, a book, who'd written the book, and so on. So I had the references if I then chose to use those ideas to develop my own in my thesis. Now, as I said, this commonplace book, I started as a hobby. And I just collected things that I found interesting and I shared them on my channel. I kind of dropped off a bit. I haven't used this commonplace book in ages, which is a bit of a shame because it's lovely. I really like flicking through it like this. And obviously, if I was doing it on my own, I would read the quotations and start thinking about them. And in fact, that's one of the things I enjoy about doing a little paper collage. If I've written a quotation, I can think about it while I'm decorating my page. So that just gives me a nice relaxing thing to do while I'm thinking, which is something that I personally enjoy. But in your commonplace book, you can collect ideas, information on anything that interests you, whatever your hobby is. If you're a journaler, maybe you want a commonplace book because you watch a lot of YouTube videos on journaling, like this one, and you get an idea and you might want to pop it in your commonplace book as something that you might want to come back to later. So you might have a section that's on ideas for organising your supplies, or you might have a section on ideas of supplies that you would like to purchase. Or you might have a section on ideas of how to use supplies in unusual ways. or whatever interests you. Or as I said, it could be recipes, it could be poems, it could be ideas for creative writing if that's your thing, it could be art if that's your thing. And I've just got to the bit where I've done some new pages, so I'm just going to finish off by sharing with these new pages with you. And can I just begin by giving a trigger alert, because what I have decided to do now with my Commonplace book is move it in a slightly different direction, and that's to do with my mental health. And in fact, before I talk about that, before you run away, if that's likely to trigger you, should I just mention that, like, in my mental health journal, and I'm keeping this in a very purposeful way, I'm tracking symptoms, I'm writing down how I'm feeling, and then I'm doing a daily page where I say what's happened during my day, so that I can try and work out what things trigger me, what things don't, all the rest of it. I'm still decorating. I don't need the decoration. The content, the important content in this journal is what I've written. But the fact that I'm decorating makes it enjoyable for me to do the task of the writing. That's me. If you don't enjoy decorating your pages, then why would you do it? There's no point. You don't need to. But because I enjoy doing that, it just makes this task much more fun for me, and I've kept up with it. I absolutely love that pet tape, and it's discontinued, and I only bought a sample. I'm so sad I didn't buy a whole roll. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, as I said, even though this is a really functional book for me, it's got a specific purpose, I'm still decorating it. Anyway, back to my Commonplace book. What I've decided to do is to start collecting ideas and things that I could use to write an article, a philosophical article on my mental health condition. So this is my trigger alert. If you don't want to listen to me talk about that, now is the time to click off the video. So those of you that have watched me before know that I struggle a lot with my mental health. I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and dissociation. That was the diagnosis that was given to me by my psychiatrist, who deals with all my drugs, and then my psychologist, who I'm working with in an effort to try and make myself become more functional. She has formed the conclusion that the dissociation is caused by dissociative identity disorder, and that is a condition that used to be called multiple personality disorder. And I've been having therapy with her for some time now, and it's taking her a long time to get me to accept that this may be the case, that I have DID, as I find the thought confusing, puzzling, frightening. I didn't really know anything about it, so I had to find out more about what it is, and then I found it difficult to accept that I might have it. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter whether I do or don't have it. The treatment's going to be the same either way, which is therapy, but obviously it helps to focus the therapy if you know what you're dealing with. And I said to her, what I'd really like to do is write an article on dissociative identity disorder. I can't speak. On dissociative identity disorder. I'll call it DID because it's easier. And she sort of cautioned me against that at this stage, because she said, what I really want you to do is avoid intellectualizing, because that's what you always do to avoid feeling what you're feeling. And I thought, fair point. Isn't it awful when someone tells you something you don't want to hear, but you have to accept that it's true? And so she said she would like to encourage me for the time being to be focusing on my internal world, what I'm feeling, how it makes my body feel, and I'm tracking all of that in my journal that I just showed you. And she wants me to start trying to make connections and communicate with other parts of my personality. So the thought is with DID is that due to childhood trauma, your personality doesn't develop as it would have done if you hadn't had that trauma. And because you dealt with that trauma by dissociating, it means sort of parts of your personality fragment, and you end up with a person who is more than one person but sharing the same brain and body. I find the whole idea really very peculiar, but I'm going with it for the time being. So yeah, I'm supposed to be focusing on making communications with these other parts of me, and I find that terrifying. I really don't want to do it. So I'm being very resistant in therapy at the moment, because I know that those are the parts, if indeed they are there, and there is lots of evidence to suggest they are, sadly, There's lots and lots of evidence to suggest that they are. And if those parts are holding my trauma memories, and I don't want them, I don't want to know about them, I don't want to remember. So I'm finding it really hard to build any kind of communication with those other parts. But as a result, I'm very dysfunctional. So for example, this week, I wanted to finish writing happy mail letters to my happy mail friends. It's a fun task, really enjoyed doing it. Started making little things that I can send, and I've ordered stuff that I can include in with the letters, just some little bits and pieces, nothing enormous. So if you're one of my happy mail friends, don't get too excited. But after a week, I've hardly completed any of that task, because when I dissociate, I have amnesia for that period and I've lost it, because that other part of me is then doing something completely different. I've no idea what it is because I don't communicate with them, but whatever it is they're doing, I don't know anything about, and it's stopping me doing what I want to do. So there's a lot of work that's got to be done to work out what exactly is going on in my strange mind. So it is dysfunctional, and that's only obviously a mild dysfunction. But in fact, I had to take early retirement because, and I had a job as a university lecturer in philosophy, I had to take early retirement because this dissociation was becoming so dysfunctional for me that I couldn't carry on working in a responsible way. So after all that sharing, let me have a sip of coffee, which is unfortunate because I'll now have to edit out the gulp. Nobody wants to hear someone gulp their coffee, do they? So after all that, I thought, well, okay, so I won't be researching properly and trying to write an article. I'll be doing the things that my psychologist says I need to do, hence my mental health journal that I'm keeping up with. But I will start collecting little bits of information, ideas, quotations that could help me in the future should I decide to do some research on dissociative identity disorder, if my psychologist thinks it's the right time for me to do that. So I thought I'll start with the question, what is a person? Most people commonly use the word person. They can recognise one person in one place as being the same person in another place. You know, your friend that you met for coffee last week is the same person as the friend you meet for lunch this week. We're very good at that. But what does it mean to say that something is a person or somebody is a person? So I started with John Locke, who I already mentioned, because he did that little extract on how to index a commonplace book. And according to Locke, he says that a person is a thinking, intelligent being that has reason and reflection and can consider itself as itself. The same thinking thing in different times and places. So me now speaking to you, I am a thinking, more or less intelligent being that has reason and reflection. I do consider myself to be myself, and I think I'm the same thinking thing that did the last video that some of you will have watched. So I'm the same thinking thing in different times and places. And I thought, well, yeah, okay, then I'm a person, that's fine. Are my other parts people according to this definition? Well, they could be, because if they also say I'm Ali A, Ali B could also think of themselves as having reason and reflection and consider themselves as the same thinking thing that ate a sandwich that morning and then the next day went for a walk. So there could be more than one person sharing my brain and body. So this definition makes dissociative identity possible. But is this definition right? I don't know. I need to think about that. And I'm not supposed to think about these things too deeply because I'm supposed to be thinking about how I'm feeling. But anyway, the next step that I took on this question of persons was I looked up in the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the Routledge one that's just online. It just gives you very short, easy to understand little explanations of ideas. And B. Garrett wrote the entry on this question, and he said, are persons immaterial souls only contingently attached to their bodies, as Plato and Descartes believed? And of course, many religious people believe that they have a soul and that their soul then after death can go to heaven or can achieve nirvana or can be reincarnated depending on your belief system. And I guess that they would think that the person is attached to that soul. I don't know, I'm assuming that. On the other hand, you might want to argue that the person is attached to a specific body. So he says here, or are persons animals? So animals of a certain sort, presumably human. Or might there be robot persons? We're getting further and further with research into artificial intelligence. Is there going to become a point where we might want to think that an artificially created intelligence is a person? Interesting. So a little bit more for me to get my teeth into there. I didn't mention my decorations. You can see I've just done some stamping and some collaging and stickers. Very simple little things. More stamping. I found the stamp I lost. This dot one. I really love that one and I found it. Yay. So I used it. And I found the stamp that Jackie made for me. So I'm using that too. And I've just sort of outlined and made it look like a bit of torn paper and just made it fun for me to look at when I'm flipping through. So then I started thinking about, well, what if Ali A, i.e. me, commits a crime? I don't know. I'm not a criminal. I can't think what kind of crime I might commit. I don't know. Maybe what would I do? I really try not to commit crimes. Okay, let's just pretend I am a criminal. So I rob a bank and I would be held responsible for that. If I was caught, I would be held responsible. If there was evidence, I'd be charged. I'd go to court and then I would get some consequence, presumably be put in prison for long time or whatever. Now, in my case, if Ali A is not a criminal, what if Ali B, one of the other parts of my personality that I don't communicate with, what if she commits a crime? Am I, Ali A, responsible for her crime? Now, that's a really interesting thing. And I think there have been cases where people have faked having dissociative identity disorder in order to argue that they're not responsible for a crime. And I thought that was interesting. I'm not intending to do that, by the way. I'm hoping none of my parts commit crimes. I've not had any evidence that any of us commit crimes. And apparently it's quite unusual with people with DID to commit crimes. And it's very unusual for them to be violent. So whatever Hollywood tells us, they're not right about that, not when they actually look at the research. But anyway, I digress. So that made me start thinking about the legality of the legality of personhood. So this quotation that I put in next is from Dr. Josh Jowett from the University of Newcastle in the UK. And he says in a little, I don't know, I think it was like a blog post I found, he said that the concept of legal personhood means something very different to how we use the word person in everyday speech. And so that had me intrigued. And I thought, well, how do they use it in law then? And he goes on to say that since Roman times, the law has classified everything as either a person or a thing. Okay, so either you're a person or you're a thing. So I am a person, but my pair of scissors here is a thing. And because I'm a person, I have rights and responsibilities. If I stab somebody with this pair of scissors, which I'm definitely not going to do, I'm responsible, not the scissors. They're just a thing. They have no responsibilities, no rights. But I do. I have responsibilities and I have rights. And so I'm accountable for what I do, but things aren't. And things have not only no responsibilities, they have no rights. So if I choose to put this very lovely pair of scissors into the dustbin, it has no rights. It can't complain that it's been badly treated because it's a pair of scissors. It's just a thing. Okay, so moving on to my last page, you might be relieved to know. And look at this. I found that colour ink, which is called Iced Spruce. I really love that colour. It's a distress oxide ink called Iced Spruce by Tim Holtz, and I did some more stamping with my dotty stamp and some stamping here and some paper pieces and a sticker. And this last bit that I again got from Dr. J. Jowett is that in law, some things we might think of as a thing have in fact been classified as persons. And he gave examples. Temple buildings, persons, they have rights. Idols, ships, corporations, and recently even a river in New Zealand. It has been treated in law as a person and not as a thing. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. And you can see how that might be the case. And obviously there are debates. But he also mentioned this very sad story of an elephant who ironically was called Happy the Elephant. And he was developing health conditions that some people thought were a result of the way that he was being treated. And anyway, it ended up in court. And the court deemed that the elephant was property. So it was property of its owner. It was a thing. And therefore it's not a person. It doesn't have rights. It doesn't have responsibilities. And so poor old Happy the Elephant couldn't be helped by the law. And I thought, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because don't we think of newborn babies as being persons? I mean, we don't think that you can treat newborn babies badly. We think that's a really bad thing to do. And I'm sure a court, if you treated your newborn baby badly, would, you know, there would be consequences for you and the baby would be taken away from you. And yet a newborn baby has no more mental capacity than an elephant. I mean, it's got the potential for it, so you could argue it that way, I guess. But anyway, it started me thinking about lots of interesting things. And I hope that having a look at some of these quotations has made you have a think about, what do you think a person is? And why do you think it's, well, it is important. I always say, when people say, what's the point of philosophy? You just talk about, you know, questions with no answers. But quite often that's not the case. In fact, science was born out of philosophy. And philosophers are looking for truth. And when it comes to a question like what is a person, if it's going to go to court and it's affecting people's life, it is important, right? It's not just about opinions. It's about trying to find the truth through reasoning and other empirical evidence and such like. So that is my little share of my little Commonplace book, and I'm going to continue exploring this concept of person. And then if that leads me off into wanting to explore something else, then I just make a note in my index that I've stopped. So I started looking at what is a person on page 82. If on page 93 I start talking about something completely different, then I'll just put 92 here and carry on with my next topic. So that's how I use my Commonplace book. If you have a Commonplace book, do let me know in the comments what you use yours for, because I'd be really interested to know. And do look out for my next video, because I have ordered a giveaway gift to give away on my channel in celebration of the fact that I've reached 3,000 subscribers, which I know is only a really, really tiny amount compared to really big channels. But to me, that is enormous, because it all depends on your point of view, doesn't it? And I'm so excited, and I wanted to do a really nice giveaway, which I will be. And so if you have been valiant enough to stay to the end of this video, you've had that little sneaky warning, although I think I might have mentioned it last time actually. But anyway, do look out for that in my next video. And for now, all that remains is to thank you so much for watching me, and I hope I will see you very soon. Bye.